Welcome to the Inner Revival podcast, because revival starts with you. As we allow God to heal, restore, transform us, and renew us from the inside out, we say, Lord, have your way in us. Let your kingdom come. Let your will be done in us on earth as it is in heaven. Welcome back to the Inner Revival podcast. This is your host, Monika Kirkland, and I am so glad that you are here. Today, I am having such an important and hope-filled conversation with my guest, Kristen Hallinan. Kristen is a sought-after writer and speaker. She is passionate about helping women redeem the pain of their past and move towards a healthier and more hopeful future. She is on mission to equip women and support families. Kristen has previously worked as Director of Development for MOPS International. She enjoys working with teen moms, crisis pregnancy centers, and serving as a premarital mentor with her husband, Sean, in Dallas, Texas. Legacy Changer is Kristen's debut book, and we are going to be talking all about it today. So please join me in welcoming Kristen and stay tuned for this amazing conversation. Hi, Kristen. Welcome to the Inner Revival podcast. I am so happy that you are here with us and to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here having this conversation.
Yay. So you have your new book, Legacy Changer, coming out February 20th. And so this is such an important book. I've had the privilege to start reading it, and there's so many just words of wisdom and practical resources and tools in this book. And so we're going to dive into that. But I wanted to start and just give you the space to tell us a little bit about your journey and what led you to writing this book.
Yeah, it was many years in the making. It really stemmed from me having a chaotic, dysfunctional childhood home that I grew up in. And fast forward many years later, I found myself married and a mom of 4 kids. And I was repeating all of the unhealthy behaviors and reactions and just cycles that I saw modeled in my home. And my marriage was struggling because of it. I was not the mom that I wanted to be because of it. And I just knew that something had to change. And so finally, I got myself into trauma therapy, and I started to dig into my story and unpack all of the things that happened. And a lot of it, honestly, was about things, not things that were horrible that happened, but all of the good things that should happen in a childhood that didn't happen. A lot of emotional neglect and withdrawal, and leaving me to parent myself and parent my sister. And so there was a lot of unpacking and healing to be done. And it took me many, many years of therapy and finding resources and mentorship and finding guidance. And I just wanted to offer women a resource that brought all of the knowledge and the tools that I had learned over that journey. I just wanted to bring that together in one package for them. If I know so many people are on a healing journey, or maybe thinking about, maybe everything wasn't great in my childhood home. Maybe I do want to do things different, but it can be super overwhelming to know how to get started. And so the book was born out of wanting to put all those resources together in one spot.
Yes, I love that. That's so important, because it just makes it accessible for people who maybe have financial barriers or time barriers to, get into counseling. I think it's so important to make those tools accessible. I love that you did that in your heart to just help women. And of course, we encourage counseling, and to push through those barriers. But this is such a valuable tool, a valuable resource for people that I know is going to bless them so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wanted today to, in our conversation, we're both moms of 4, and I think so much as women, as mothers, I was not prepared for the way that motherhood would just bring up so much of that pain that was maybe repressed, or, they say that, often what comes out of you in those moments is kind of what was already there. And I was surprised at my own triggers and how angry I would get or frustrated. And I love how you have talked about how, those common triggers can be a result of unhealed pain. And so will you just talk to us a little bit about those triggers and what we can do when we feel triggered as moms?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, if that is not just like our daily life as moms, because those little kids, like we love them to their core, but they are triggering and
Yes.
they are, pushing our boundaries constantly. And that's what they're designed to do. But if we have places in us that are unhealed, then we are often caught off guard by it and not wholly prepared to deal with it in a way that maybe we feel proud of later or that's long term helpful to our kids or the environment in our home. So, what I was finding for me, loud noises or yelling was so triggering. Even, something innocent like somebody shoved in the drawer really hard or slammed a door or whatever, kids are just stomping around loud, but I would find myself freezing at those times.
Mhm.
And then maybe grumpy the next couple of minutes after that or not reacting well. Or my husband saw a lot of yelling modeled in his home. That was kind of a discipline technique in their home. And so he was doing the same thing and a lot of yelling at our kids. And I would just find myself totally freezing and shutting down
Mhm.
in those moments.
Yeah.
Um, Other things like dishonesty. We were a home of secret keeping growing up
Mhm.
and a lot of, nothing of this gets outside of the family.
Yeah.
And so when I found my kids keeping secrets or lying to me, it just swelled back up in me those memories of
Mm.
having to live in that secret, shameful kind of environment. Um, Narcissism by kids. I mean, that's kind of the definition of kids. They haven't developed the ability to think outside themselves yet. And that's just age appropriate and normal and
Yeah.
natural. But when we grew up with parents that should have developed the ability to think outside of themselves, and instead it was very them focused in my home, it was all about their moods. And so I
Mm.
became super hyper vigilant, trying to always anticipate what is their mood going to be? How can I get ahead of it and anticipate their needs so I prevent a bad mood coming? And so having that same kind of behavior show up in my kids, even though it was a completely different situation and it was appropriate for kids, it was triggering those same feelings in me of I don't matter. My needs
Mm.
are not heard, they're not seen. Um, Not showing up, participating in the family. My dad would constantly leave birthday celebrations or Christmas, and he would just withdraw. And so if one of my kids didn't really feel like playing family game night, or they didn't really want to attend their brother's basketball game,
Mm.
or whatever it was that it was not showing togetherness, it made those same feelings come up in me.
Yeah.
And, that's just how trauma works. Like it gets stored in our nervous system. It's an imprint of that feeling and that memory. And so our body is like, oh, I remember this horrible feeling. And it feels like it's happening again in the here and the now. And so what I
Mm.
found is that it was just vital for me to really dig into trauma therapy and show up for EMDR and the different therapies that reverse that in our nervous system.
Mhm.
But in the moment, it was about breathing
Yeah.
and taking a pause before I responded and deciding ahead of time how I was going to respond. Because
Mhm.
if I have to decide in the moment where I feel triggered and I'm feeling gross in my body, how I'm going to respond, it is going to be an ugly response. But if
Yeah.
I've decided ahead of time, okay, in that moment, I'm just going to say, Mom needs a break for a second. And I walk away and I have a second to think through my response. Or if I'm going to say, it looks like you're feeling, that's kind of my go to. I echo back what they're probably feeling, and that
Yeah.
takes it off of me, and helps me remember this isn't about me. This isn't about the memory that happened to me a long
Mhm.
time ago. This is about my kid's frustrated. My kid has a need that feels unmet right now. My kid is tired. They're hungry. They're dysregulated for whatever reason. They had a bad day at school, and I can remember that it's about them, and I can go back to being a good mom. Then
Yeah.
that's when I'm finding a little bit more success in those moments of being triggered.
Yeah. That's so good. I think I love what you said about deciding ahead of time kind of what you're going to say. That's been a tool that I've used because I have struggled with yelling or like just kind of reacting in the moment. And so if I kind of think through when I'm in a calm state of even like having some planned phrases to say in the moment, it has helped so much because then it gives me the space to not just react, but to intentionally respond and then take a minute. You talk about box breathing in your book, and that has been really helpful for me when those feelings arise. And so even just, pausing and breathing, and that's really, really good. Yeah. And I think, our generation of parents, we are worried about messing up our kids. We're like, we don't want to mess up our kids. We want them to have this emotional well-being. And so it's hard because we come to it with our own sense of brokenness. How do you manage to be a good parent and manage all your kids' emotions at the same time? Like what tools would you have about that?
For me, it's been kind of twofold. It's been number one, gaining an understanding of what God's grace really looks like, because I did not grow up in a home that believed. And so everything I've learned about God, my whole relationship with him has been as a mom and as an adult. And I used to think that it was all up to me to make their childhood this perfect dream that would avoid all the pain that I avoided. And what I've learned and really come to see is true over and over again is that for all the areas that I'm falling short, his grace is more than enough. And
Amen.
he covers those kiddos. He knows already how I'm going to mess up today, and he's already got it. He's never caught off guard by my bad behavior or, their sinful behavior. And so just not getting into a downward spiral, that it's all on me. Because I think, especially for those of us who grow up with a lot of pain, there was a lot that was all on us. It was all up to us to regulate our own emotions and to navigate our childhood with little understanding of what was happening. For me, it was all up to me to parent myself, to do a lot of parenting of my sister. And so to separate that MO that I was used to into now, it's not all up to me. It's up to God, has been just really life-giving. But from a more neuroscience standpoint too, I think the best news that I learned in all my research is that everyone has pain in their life. There's nobody that escapes it. But I got really curious about why is it that some people don't end up with trauma? Because we've all been through hard things, but not everybody walks away with it affected the same way. And so what was it about those people's situations? And what I learned is that trauma happens when we feel like we have no agency, no sense of control over what's happening around us. And then we don't receive any care afterwards to regulate our emotions and to understand what happened. And so in the brain, what's happening is it's staying in that instinctual fight, flight, or freeze kind of area. And it's not coming forward to the prefrontal cortex where we understand anything. And so if I can come alongside my kids and care for them and help them understand what just happened to them, help them understand why this feeling is feeling so overwhelming at the moment, and help them make a plan where they get to participate in the plan and they have some sense of control over what's happening. They know that their actions matter. What they do next matters because I'm going to hear their voice and their family is going to hear their voice. And we can put the control back in their hands rather than this is a do because I say so kind of moment. Then I'm finding that they walk away from that painful event okay, and they're not carrying the same trauma that I did.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. I like there's the science approach and then the truth of the gospel that those who are in Christ, we have the Holy Spirit. We don't have to parent alone. And that is such good news because on my own, I really can't do it. As a mom of four, it's so hard. And we have to rely on his grace. We have to rely on the power of the Holy Spirit within us to strengthen us and to show us how to respond in those moments and how to heal ourselves so that we can, it's hard to parent well when you are operating out of those unhealed places of trauma and neglect. And that's so good that the science standpoint, that's really interesting about how some people, you're right. How some people walk away and they're, less traumatized. So that's interesting. It's comes back to control because so many who have been through trauma do tend to want to reach for control and try to control.
Yeah.
For me, that was so true. Like you said about putting this pressure on yourself. That happens to me around the holidays because I had a lot of trauma surrounding Thanksgiving and Christmas. My mom was an alcoholic. So the holidays she would try really hard, but then she would often get completely, inebriated and intoxicated. And so for me as a mom, it's like I get a little bit triggered on the holidays. Like I have to make it perfect because it wasn't for me. And if I could just make it so perfect for my kids, and I'm realizing I'm putting this pressure on myself that I don't need to carry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's so interesting about control, because it's me trying to control the outcome and control my kids' future by giving them this perfect holiday. And it's just pressure that I don't need on myself.
Yeah. I always try to visualize the tighter that I'm gripping all these things in my environment, the less hands I have for God, because I am not hanging on to him with everything in my might if I'm also over here trying to hang on to all this stuff. And I can't hang on to him with both. So like, I got to drop it, because no matter what sense of security or safety, that false sense of security you get from trying to manipulate and control things, like it is nothing compared to the safety I'm going to feel over here if I'm just clinging to God.
Yeah. That's so good. We have this practice at our church where every Sunday, the whole congregation, they open their hands and we all pray together. And it's like giving what we need to give to God and then receiving his peace and the things we just need to ask and receive from him. That's such a good way to look at it. That
I love that.
Open-handed posture.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So what would you say, if there's a mom or a parent listening who, they want to break the cycle, they want to leave a better legacy, they want to be a legacy changer, but maybe they're in a season that's just really hard, just the day-to-day grind with raising little ones. What would you say if they're like, I just don't know where to begin. I don't even know if I have the energy to heal right now. What encouragement would you have for that person who's maybe just in survival mode and doesn't know where to start?
First of all, I have so much compassion for that person because I was that person. And I would say that when you are feeling like I am barely surviving every day, like I do not have time to be digging into my story and doing all this healing work, that crisis mode is what has to get taken care of first. Like we have got to meet like your basic needs, your rest. You need to be fed. You need to be spiritually fed. You need to have some sort of contact with somebody else, whether it's your spouse or a friend or a counselor or a mentor, but there needs to be somebody in your life that you feel like is walking alongside you, because God did not create us to do this journey alone. And that loneliness, it just makes us like bunker down on the shame and the darkness and get more inside of ourselves every day. And so I would just encourage you to find somebody that you can share and lighten this load with a little bit. Just, even the mental load of these are the things that are weighing me down every day. And so meeting those basic needs of what's going to get me out of crisis mode so that this every single day doesn't feel so hard. That's where we've got to start. A little bit of care for yourself. And it is the exact opposite of selfish. And I think, for me, seeing parents that were very selfish, it was like the last thing I ever wanted to do was to be selfish. And so I was give of myself and had no understanding that was robbing me of any ability to give properly to the people that I really loved and cared about. So I would say just resourcing yourself and to get out of crisis mode is the first place. And then doing some story work with a coach or digging into my book, Legacy Changer. It walks you through some of that story work. And that's going to be able to really start unpacking some of the shame that you carry. But yeah, for the mom that's just like, I can't even think about that right now, I would just say getting out of crisis mode is the first place to start.
Yes, I love what you said about, coming out of crisis mode and doing that. The story work is so important to help heal. There's a quote that you shared on the beginning of chapter 5, where you said that Maya Angelou knew the pain from keeping her abuse secret for 34 years. She later said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. I think That is so beautiful. I think that's why the story work that you mentioned is so important. And I think as hard as it is, first we have to get out of crisis mode, but at the same time, digging into that is going to help us stay out of crisis mode.
Yep.
Because our stories and the pain that we carry keep us and plunge us further into crisis. And so definitely, like, I would say to the mom who's like, where do I even begin? Your book is such a good place to begin. And so they can definitely grab a copy of that. So I wanted to pivot a little bit and talk about boundaries, because maybe you're someone and you're like, I've healed from a lot of my childhood trauma, or I had a great family, didn't have a lot of trauma, but this is something that I think all people, even healthy, functioning families, can struggle with, is setting healthy, appropriate boundaries, especially when there's grandkids involved and families involved and holidays and all the things that can bubble up for people. And so what advice do you have about setting appropriate boundaries, and what does that look like for you?
Gosh, this is like the $1 million question because boundaries are so hard. Boundaries are like, we've been doing this dance all along with people we're in a relationship with. And even if it's a super unhealthy, dysfunctional relationship, it is the dance that we're both used to for probably decades on end if it's a family member. And so the second that I decide to set a new boundary, it's like I'm changing the dance steps up on you. And you're like, wait, I liked that dance we were used to. I knew what to expect out of you. I knew how to get what I wanted out of you. And I don't really like this new version of you. And so it's just so hard to receive boundaries. And so I think going into setting new boundaries with some understanding of that it's going to be awkward and it's going to feel weird and it's maybe not going to be well received at first. I think that can help us a ton because we prepare ahead of time for people's responses. So we are really saying, what limitation do I need to set? Primarily on myself most of the time, or on this relationship and the way we relate to each other, to protect my own mental health, physical health, emotional health, protect my kids from what they're seeing modeled. And so I think boundaries can get a bad rap, especially in Christian circles, because we want to be gentle and we want to be loving and we want unity and we want peace. But the thing that we have to understand is real unity and peace can't be achieved without proper safeguards in place. And so the boundaries are absolutely necessary, and they're also biblical. Jesus modeled that he didn't give everybody that he came across equal access to himself. He had the disciples that had a greater amount of access to his personal life, and that's how it should be in our lives too. We need to be smart about who we're giving what level of access, and if somebody continuously shows us that they can't be kind and gentle and loving with whatever vulnerability or access that we're offering them into our life, then maybe that's not the level of access they should be receiving. And so we step it back a little bit. And, like I said, the relationships are a dance. They're an ever evolving dance. Like if they respond really well to the boundaries we put in place and show that like they really do want this to be a safe relationship for everyone on both sides, like maybe we can open back up that level of limitation a little bit. And I think that's the hope and desire with boundaries. That's what we're working towards. Instead of seeing them as a wall, they should just be seen as a limitation that has to be put in place, that I'm putting in place for the benefit of my own safety right now.
And ultimately, I think it protects the relationship. For me with my family, I had a counselor say to me once, we're not putting up walls, but we can put up fences because fences have gates. And so it can allow people to come in and out. And that was helpful for me because for a lot of years I had to put up really rigid kind of walls and protection. But as I've allowed certain members of my family back in, I'm in a healthier place so I can give those boundaries and operate from a healthier place myself. but allow people in and let them know it's because I value you and I want you to be in my life and in my children's lives that I have to put these protections in place. And I want you to honor them so that this can work because I do value this relationship and we are family. And so I just had to change my mindset a little bit from viewing it as it's a place, it's a way to value other people, value my family so that we can be in healthy relationship with one another.
Yeah. And I found as a mom, I am talking a lot about them with my kids. I grew up in a home where everything was secret. And so the parents didn't really talk to us about anything or about why relationships were or not working with the extended family. But with our kids, I want them to know that, if we decided to see a certain relative less, this is why, and this is what was a not okay thing that they were choosing to do. And I don't want you exposed to that, but we love them. And this is how we are going to continue to choose to love them. And keeping that really open because I want them to grow up knowing a sense of how to navigate these. And so I think just the openness with them has been really important in our family.
Yeah. That's so good. So important. Resonate with that so much and with our kids and having that open dialogue. And I had heard you share before about, how you kind of prep your kids a little bit in the car on your way to see certain family members and then you talk about it afterwards. And I think, that preparation sometimes is really important. As well as being able to just openly communicate after and process and give them space to ask any questions. Mm-hmm. We've definitely had some interesting conversations with our kids, even ones that I'm like not ready to have, but that are important to have, as we allow people back into our life. And that's so good. Thank you for sharing that. So I wanted to close our conversation talking a little bit about grief and just the importance of lament and what that looks like biblically. And I love what you shared in your closing chapter of the book. So if you would just close us with that, just what it looks like to grieve, what we need to grieve and to lament with the Lord.
Yeah. I did not have a healthy sense of what it looked like to grieve. And I had never given myself permission to grieve until I started talking about it with my counselor, because what I realized was that all these things that should have happened in my childhood, but didn't, they were something that was worth grieving. And that was going to be a necessary part of my healing, to grieve that little Kristen should have received care. Teenage Kristen should have received conversations that just were never present. And so I started to allow myself to cry and things like that, and kind of wondered, why is this never moving the dial? Why am I not ever really feeling better from this? Until I dug into scripture more about what biblical lament looks like, because how God tells us to grieve is pretty different than I think the world's definition and view of grief. According to the world, it's just crying or, sitting in your bed and eating a tub of ice cream and then just getting over it. But grief is like a roller coaster that ebbs and flows. And when we're doing it with the Lord, it looks totally different. And I just love the Psalms so much, because David is like, I can just relate to him. He just, almost has these fits of like, everything is going horrible, Lord. But then he always comes back to what matters and what's most important. And then Psalm 13, he just gave a beautiful pattern for us to follow, of what grief can look like. He showed turning towards God and doing our grief process at his feet. We're doing it alongside him in his presence. And then voicing your pain. This was the part that was hardest for me for a really long time, because I felt like if I had a buttoned up version of me that I was presenting to God, he was going to love me more. And so took me a long time to be able to voice my pain towards him. But he wants us to be able to actually verbalize that towards him, and then asking him for his help. It's the belief that he's bigger and that he can overcome, no matter how messed up and horrible the situation seems right now, that he is bigger and he can swoop in. And then choosing to trust him, because it's that posture of, that Daniel had. And even if not, then my God is still good. Even if he doesn't answer this prayer, even if he doesn't help me walk through this grief in the way that, sounds most ideal to my very limited understanding of what life should look like, then he's still good. I'm still going to worship him, and I'm still going to love him. And so doing that over and over and over throughout the grief cycle has been tremendously healing to me.
Yes, that's so good. That grieving has been such an instrumental part of my healing journey too. I think for me, it was really easy to just distract myself from the pain and not grieve it, but then to grieve it and give voice to it and really hand it over and entrust it to God. It brought so much healing and restoration. And so if you are listening and you just don't know where to start with grieving or allowing yourself to grieve, or maybe you feel guilty for even feeling these things, I would just encourage you to dig into what she said. Those 4 points. Can you repeat them for us?
Yeah. Turn towards God, voice your pain, ask God for help, and then choose to trust God.
Yes. Amen. That's so good. Wow. Thank you so much, Kristen. This has been just such a wealth of information and just wisdom and encouragement. I would love to tell people how to connect with you. I know you're on Instagram, but tell us where they can find you, where they can pre-order this book, that they have to go on, do it today. So you don't forget, the link will be in the show notes, and pre-order her book, Legacy Changer.
I just love having conversations about healing. So please reach out and connect with me. It's on Instagram. I'm Kristen.Hallinan. It's Hallinan. And my website is the same, Kristen Hallinan. And actually, if you go on to the homepage of my website, you'll find a cycle breaking superpower quiz. And so this just helps you dig into what childhood needs that you maybe have that went unmet, and what skills you've developed as a result that can actually help you break these cycles now. So that can be a really insightful place to get started. And then I would love for you to pre-order my book, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, wherever books are sold.
Yay. And all that will be linked. I'm going to go take the quiz today too. That sounds awesome. So all that will be linked in the show notes. And just thank you so much, Kristen. You are just such a hope-filled and just inspiring woman. And I just love just the way that you're encouraging women that they can make a difference, that they can change their family tree and impact future generations. So thank you just for who you are and the work that you're doing in the world. It's so needed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this important conversation. I pray that it has encouraged you and blessed you as you go out and change your family tree and change future generations impacted because you decided to be a cycle breaker. And so I just bless you with that. And as always, if this conversation has encouraged you, would you take a moment to rate and subscribe to the podcast? Maybe share it with a friend or share it on your social media so that we can continue to get the word out about this new podcast. I'm so grateful for each one of you. God bless you.